all just whisper that to ourselves. I am right. That would be a good thing to whisper to ourselves when we're having a hard time. When we are having a moment of forgetting who we are, take a deep breath. I am light. I want to ask, when's the last time somebody sat down with you and read you a story? No? How many friends do you have? Someone saw take a deep breath. I invite you to take a deep breath and relax and imagine that you are sitting in the children's section of the library. Or you're sitting at your grandmother's feet and she's reading you a story. Whoever that favorite story reader was for you. And if there wasn't a favorite story reader when you were young, then imagine now that you have one. Let me be the story reader this morning. This is a story I first heard in France. I heard it in other places after that. I loved it so much that David and I put it in our book. So once upon a time, we're told this is a true story. I feel like it was played out in many, many different places. This morning, we take a deep breath to hear the story about a man who lived in France in the mid-1800s. Times were hard, and his family, like many others, had nowhere to live. They were fleeing from oppression and unkindness. They were sleeping on cold, dirty alleyways. Jobs were scarce. This man's children were starving like many others' children. And so this father made the desperate decision to steal food for his family. And along with others who were doing the same thing, they were heartbroken to have to be reduced to stealing. And during this robbery, the shopkeeper was killed. All of the people were arrested, and this man's intention to find food for his children became a crime and a sentence and a life in prison. After many tortured years of back-breaking labor, he made another life-changing decision. He escaped from prison. Afraid and alone and once again starving, he ran for his life, exhaustingly trekking through mountain passes and across rivers. And finally, he was far enough away from the prison to stop for rest and hide in a big stone barn. Cold and hungry, weariness overtook him, and he slept for days. A week passed when one day the farmer's young grandchildren were playing in the barn and heard snoring in the hayloft. They quietly climbed the ladder and discovered the convict in torn, dirty clothes, sleeping huddled and shivering under the hay. Soon he awoke from his fitful sleep, surrounded by 3 small children who were curiously and quietly watching him sleep. They were trusting and innocent. They didn't ask who he was or where he had come from, because as young children do, they just simply asked, "Will you tell us a story?" Cautiously, he considered the children's request and consented to tell the only stories he knew, which were Bible stories that he had heard as a boy from his grandmother. So each day, the children would secretly visit the man in the barn. They brought soap and water and warm clothes and blankets, and they always asked for stories. And because he spoke so much of God, the children reasoned that this long-haired, bearded man must be Jesus. Wouldn't you make that assumption? Filled with faith, as young children often are, they asked him to pray for their beloved grandfather who had been sick for weeks and was most probably dying. The convict awkwardly knelt as he had seen his grandmother do so many times, and lifting his eyes toward the sky and folding his hands, the former prisoner whispered a tender prayer for the farmer whose barn had become his safe haven. As he prayed, the children watched his face soften with a glowing, ethereal light. And by the time he said amen, tears filled his eyes, and the same soft light filled the hayloft. A few days later, the children raced to the barn and hurriedly climbed the ladder to the loft. Laughing ecstatically, they announced that family and neighbors were baffled with this turn of events, happily celebrating their grandfather's remarkable recovery. The old farmer himself was most surprised of all and was on his way to the barn to meet this man of miracles for the first time. If the farmer had seen the convict weeks before, he would have seen in his face a much different story. Years of grueling, hard labor had taken its toll, though the suffering of losing his family was even harder. Now the man was clean, well-nourished, rested, and inexplicably peaceful beyond even his own understanding. As he timidly approached the man whom the children called Jesus, the grandfather's eyes filled with tears because he gazed upon the most gentle face he'd ever seen, one that mysteriously glowed with an otherworldly light. Leaning on his grandchildren's shoulders for support, the farmer struggled to kneel and then humbly asked forgiveness from Jesus. The convict gently rested his hand on the farmer's head and whispered, "You are forgiven, my good and faithful servant." Gradually, a quiet stillness permeated the hayloft sanctuary as the children knelt in prayer beside their grandfather. After a long, prayerful silence, the farmer gratefully opened his tear-filled eyes and discovered that the man of God was no longer standing beside him. No one saw or heard him leave. No other villagers saw him walking through their fields or sleeping in their barns. And it is said from that day forward he was never seen again. Yet all these years later, the beloved story continues to be told in this small village in France about the man whom some say was Jesus. So I invite us this morning to take a deep breath and imagine our own fathers, our own grandfathers. Perhaps we had so much love with our fathers that we don't feel like there's anything to forgive. Or perhaps we had struggle in our relationships with our fathers, and still many of us have learned there's no need for forgiveness. Where love resides, forgiveness is not necessary. So I invite us to consider this morning that we have in our hearts and in our capacity for being the presence of love, we can energetically place our hands on the heads of the fathers, the grandfathers, the uncles, the teachers, all those who are part of our journey. We can bless them. Near and far, they may not even be living in physical any longer. We can still energetically place our hands of blessings on their heads. Our hearts can touch their hearts. We bless them with a blessing so complete that our own understanding, our own sense of who these individuals were, our own empathy is available to us in ways that haven't been available before. We can empathically connect with the souls of all those we've shared our journeys with. And this morning we want to energetically connect with the souls of those who we call our fathers. Some of them we knew and some of them we didn't. We'll never know their full stories, why they made the decisions they did, why they had certain actions, why they made certain decisions. We don't know. We bless them. We bless the souls of our fathers, the souls of our grandfathers, the souls of all those whose shoulders we stand on. We let forgiveness and peace and understanding and empathy reside in our hearts. There is great celebration when we remember that we are connected with all the souls with whom we've shared our journey. We're forever connected. So why not let the connection be one of love and peace and understanding? This morning we let our fathers off the hook for anything they said or did or didn't say or didn't do. We let our fathers off the hook for the ways they couldn't show up. We bless them wherever their souls are in their journey of light. We bless ourselves for all the fathers in the world who struggle with what they did or didn't do or said or didn't say. We bless all the fathers of the world with the capacity, with love and forgiveness. We bless the masculine consciousness of our world. We bless the masculine consciousness so that it can light up and show up and be the presence of love and kindness and right action, the highest and best decisions for a human family. One family, all connected. We call forth that beautiful masculine consciousness to show up as the powerful light of the world. The powerful presence of love, the powerful presence of peace, the powerful presence of forgiveness and understanding. We bless all those in the world now living in that masculine consciousness. We know that when people are treated as the light of the world, they can more easily show up as the light of the world. Like the convict in our story who was transformed by children who saw him as the Christ. It's as simple as this. See others as the light, and they more easily show up as the light. We see all those this morning. We see the masculine consciousness expressing in the world as the light, as the love, as the peace. And we say, so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste. Everybody go, yes. And it works. We give great thanks for technology that works. Sometimes when David is waxing on about something I've heard enough of, I take the remote and I just go.
He doesn't shut up.
No. No, he laughs.
Does he
So,
do that to you?
no. No, that's just my little game. So I wanted just to shout out to my dad this morning who passed in 2005, but I wanted to wear this in his honor for just a second because there's a story that goes with this. I was in North Florida and he said, I was visiting, he said, let's go to the little Methodist church on the hill, the one that preceded the Civil War. So we went up we were getting dressed to go up to the little Methodist church on the hill, and I walked out with my rust-colored pants and my orange shirt. And my dad said, you're not wearing that to church. I said, yeah. I said, Dad, gone are the days when you have to wear a dress to church. I can wear pants to church. He said, I'm not talking about that. You're wearing orange. I said, you mean we're not supposed to wear orange to church? He said, well, I've never seen anybody wear orange to church. I said, oh, Dad, this is all I brought. It's either I wear this to church or I don't go with you to church. Okay, come on. So we got into this North Florida country church, and in walks the lady with the high heels and all the rhinestones everywhere, and in walks other people with various colors and costumes on, and then comes in the minister with one of these sashes on. I didn't even look at my father. I just kind of leaned over and said, wow, what a great prayer sash, Dad. So to all of our fathers who had to give up old beliefs, did your dad ever have to give up an old belief of what was right or wrong or good or bad? Did they? Yes. Did you ever have to give up an old belief about something that was right or wrong or good or bad?
Never.
Never. There was a belief in his mind you couldn't wear orange to church. I was so grateful to that minister that day. I went up, I hugged him, I said, I just love you for wearing that. He said, oh yes, it's from Guatemala, the country of my birth. And my dad had something to talk with him about because he was in Guatemala right before the earthquake back in the 70s. Those beautiful people are dealing with another earthquake. I just want to bless all of our fathers who've had to give up old beliefs. Some of those old beliefs were life-threatening beliefs. They were unkind beliefs. And sometimes it's just about what you could wear to church. Right? But we all have to give up old beliefs, don't we? Are we giving up any old beliefs in this day, in this moment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're giving up some old beliefs. My talks the last few Sundays and continuing into July will be from this book, Speak Peace in a World of Conflict. It's one of the books we'll use for the class for doing crucial conversations. Are you aware sometimes that some of your conversations are more crucial than others? Some of our conversations hold within them the possibility of forgiveness and healing, or they hold within them the possibilities of more unkindness and more wounding. Sometimes we really get it. The subtitle of this book, What You Say Next Will Change Your World. Don't we know that's true? Have you ever been in a conflictive situation with somebody and you know that the next thing you say is going to make all the difference? And sometimes, you know, if you say what you're thinking about saying, it's going to drive a wedge. It's going to create lots of conflict and lots of confusion. And as somebody just said, you say it anyway. You know where it's going. Some of us are learning that if you take just another moment to pause, breathe, then you're aware that your words have a power to heal and renew or to tear apart and break down. So we're talking about some of that today, connecting with others empathically. So this is a good reminder. Chief Seattle said, man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. All things are bound together and all things connect. Now, how did he know that before Charles Fillmore? All things connect. So my words of love can have an impact on the healing and blessing of the world, or my words of prejudice and unkindness can have an impact on the world. With non-peace, non-helpfulness. That's how important our words are. Sometimes people say to me, I don't know what I can do. I don't know. How does my life make a difference? It can be as simple as paying attention to the energy of the words you're speaking to the world.
Amen.
Okay, Paula's on the job. Thank you, Paula. So speak peace in a world of conflict. So what is conflict? It's controversy, it's quarrels, it's conflict of ideas. How can you believe that? What I believe is much better. How do we show up and speak peace? So last week I told you again the story about Ida Mae Hill. If you weren't here, quick review. It's during the 50s. People of color had to ride in the back of the bus. I was on my way home with Ida Mae Hill. I went home with her in the afternoons. My mom picked us up from her house. Well, remember the lovely bus driver who said, little lady, you can sit at the front of the bus. Remember, I talked about this last week, and there was so much hatred in his face. A child knows when hatred is present. A child knows when unkindness is present. Ida Mae, she just simply said, child, sit where love is. You know, that story has guided me my whole life. She declared truth in a moment of conflictive energy, so conflictive that somebody could have been killed that day. People were being lynched. So this is where I have held this man in my thinking low these many years. I was about 8 years old then, and every time I think of this story, I put it in the book. Every time I've told this story, this is the way I think of him. And for the first time last Sunday, I confess to you, for the first time it occurred to me to pray for the soul of this human being. Are you kidding? I'm going to be 70 in December. It has been held in my heart in a feeling of what? Contempt. I have not held him in a place of understanding or empathy or forgiveness. It never occurred to me to enter into empathy with him until last Sunday when I was telling you this story.
Good for you.
Old dogs can learn new tricks. So I decided to hold him differently. In my thinking and in my heart and in my energy, I made a decision to connect with him empathically. Of course, I'm sure physically he's been gone a while. But energetically and on a soul level and the eternal life that we're living and the eternal journey, I'm now at peace with the soul of this human being, and I can feel his healing energy connected with mine. I've been healed in the process. So what is different in me now? Because it's a darn good story. I've gotten a lot of mileage out of this story. I've taught this story for a long time. Sit where love is. But isn't it interesting? I had to let go of an image of him, just like those children let go of an image of this man as a dirty convict, and they held another image of him as the light of the world. I had to let go of my image of him in order to open up empathically to a human being who was clearly taught to hate. He deserves to be let off the hook of my, as Bunny said, contempt. He is released from the hook that I've been on the hook with him.
You shine brighter now, too.
See, I've been on the hook with him. We think somebody else is on the hook for their bad behavior, but guess where we are? We're on the hook with them. So, sit where love is. So, here's the hope. If it can take me that long to get the full juice out of this story, it's possible for all of us. And I can see my angels going, oh, you vain, it took her long enough. How long, Lord, does it take for one minister to get the point of her own story? That's the reason we go and do the work, I do believe. So sympathy is different from empathy. If you're feeling sad, then I can conjure up those feelings too and feel sad. I can feel angry with you. Something happens and you're really angry. I can get angry too. That's being in sympathy with. Empathy is a little bit different. simply means being present with another human being. It doesn't even mean you have to figure out the problems and find solutions. Just simply be present. Be present with them. We're likely to learn something when we're present with another human being. Not trying to figure anything out, not trying to do anything, just be present. And that's what I was called to do with this human being. We'll call him Mr. Bus Driver. Be present with this soul. What was alive in him in that moment? You know, what's alive in us? So the empathic connection is an understanding of the heart in which we see the beauty of the divine energy alive in the other person. So I just want to invite you to think about your bus driver person. You probably have at least one. Somebody who was a presence of hatred or unkindness, or somebody in who the presence that you felt from them was frightening sometimes, was something you wanted to get away from. Sometimes it really did mean a difference between life and death. You know, some of us our lives have been saved, or we've saved our own lives from being with someone who literally was trying to snuff our life out, or at least energetically or emotionally was trying to snuff our life out. So I just think of that person right now for yourself.
And Margaret, that bus driver gave Ida Mae that wonderful gift of being able to say that to you, which is huge.
It's
And she
huge.
would have never said it
It's
to
huge.
you.
I never would have had that story. That story has guided my life. We may not know all the solutions and all the decisions, but if we just simply know to sit where love is, perhaps the very best choice will reveal itself.
And love is wherever you sit.
Love is wherever you sit.
It's within you, wherever you sit.
Within you, wherever you sit. So we see the beauty, the divine energy alive in the other person. That's the namaste that we say, or the namaskar. It simply means, I bow to the light in you. That's alive in you. Whether you're acting like a mean bus driver or not, that light's still alive in you. That takes a huge spiritual practice to see the divine light in someone when they are not acting like the light of the world.
Separate the divine self from the behavior. You don't like the behavior, but they're still a child of God. That's something that you have to practice it, but that's how it's done.
The divine in me greets the divine in you. So how many of us know that we have the divine living in us? For those of you who didn't raise your hand, let's all take a deep breath. Are you willing to consider that you might have divine energy living within you? Maybe we can raise our hand on that. You know, there's a Rabbi Gelberman from New Life Seminary, for those of you from the New York area. Rabbi Gelberman, he used to say, would you be willing to see the beauty in yourself? No matter how, would you be willing to know how beautiful you are, no matter, I have to look at my own book. Just one moment. It's a great quote, and I want to get Rabbi Gelberman's quote correctly. Oh God, help me to remember the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is. Sorry, Rabbi Gelberman. Oh God, help me to remember the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is. That's what we do when we see one another as the divine light within. There may be something about me that's not showing you my light right now, but the kindest thing you can do is to see the light in me, no matter what. Then that helps me step up more to be the light. Does that make sense? So I'm dependent on you. We're dependent, interdependent upon one another to uphold and see one another's light even when we forget. That's what community does. We help each other to remember. So when we do the namaste, at the end of our yoga classes or at the end of our meditation, it's not just a quick way to say, okay, namaste, see ya. It's namaste, I see you. I see the divine light in you, and hopefully you see it within me. So, the Good Samaritan. Everybody know the story about the Good Samaritan? It was evidently considered important enough to keep in the scriptures. You know, it's hard to believe, but back in the day of Jesus, there were people who didn't get along. And the Jews and the Samaritans didn't like each other. Are there any modern day examples? Anything we can think of? You know, in the human family, there's always something, as Gilda Radner says. So the Samaritans and the Jews, they didn't like each other. And the Samaritan was on his way, on his journey, and he saw this Jewish man who had been beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. And the Samaritan, you know the story, he made a decision. Doesn't matter that this man belongs to the culture and the community that I don't like. There's a human being on the side of the road beaten. And so I'm going to pause and help. And he became known as the Good Samaritan. He helped this man. Now, why was it important for Jesus to include that in his parables? He told lots of stories, and this was one of the ones that he told. Because we're going to be challenged, and you may think of a few examples in the day and hour we're living in. We can take whole groups of people and make them less than us, and then make decisions around whole groups of people, men and women, old and young, children, mothers, fathers. We can make decisions about them because they're in a group that we have a belief about that they're wrong or not good enough. It's a hard, hard situation to be in the world. This Good Samaritan gave an example. And Jesus even said, you know, be careful about the people who come to you in your life and they're standing right in front of you, needing help, needing some kind of support. Be careful, because you may be entertaining what?
Christ. Angels.
The Christ.
Angels.
Angels, unawares, where, you know, it's the convict and the hayloft. The children saw him as the light of the world, even though he had been serving a life term in prison. They made another decision. Oh, but they were just children. Well, evidently there's something about that, because Jesus said, be ye as little children. Go to that place in your consciousness where you're not judging, you're not holding an unkind thought about a person or other people. You are in the present moment, present with them, empathically asking, what's mine to do? Do I help this Jewish man on the side of the road? Do I help the refugee? Do I help the person who's needing help? People don't get in bad circumstances just because they like leaving their countries and their homes. They don't just get into those situations. They're running from something horrible. So this idea lives in us. The divine light in me sees the divine light in you. I can do that for the bus driver now. Can I do it for every human being in the world who's doing anything that I may or may not agree with? Ooh. Ooh. Can I hold anybody in that place in my consciousness? The divine light in me sees the divine light living in you. Can I do that easily, 24/7? Ooh. So this story again of the convict, the homeless man, hayloft, was treated differently. He was treated as the light of the world, and he began to express as the light of the world. So I was telling someone the other day about a process that I did with a Jesuit priest who was, I worked with in psychotherapy for a while. And he led me in a process. I was very angry with somebody at the time. I won't mention my former husband's name. Because that's not me. But he had me, put my feeling about former husband into one side of this infinity loop. By the way, David did the same process. Were you a Jesuit priest for me? I did this first with the Jesuit priest, and then David does this in his workshops as well. So he said, put into one side of the infinity loop the feeling that you're having about your former husband. And so I wrote rage. And in the other side of the loop, he asked me to put the feeling that would counterbalance the rage. And so I put the word understanding. And the place in the middle was my counterbalance. That was my center point. That was my place where I could sense the understanding, the forgiveness, the awareness that our life together had held sacred purpose, even though there were painful, wounding parts of it. I was able to transform the rage to a sense of understanding. And I did it in 1 second. No, I did a whole process for months, even years. Look how long it took me to forgive the bus driver, right? So I had a good friend at the time, and I was telling the sad, sad story one more time of former husband, bad, did me wrong. And she said one question to me. She said, and you, my dear, are beyond reproach. Dare she remind me of who I am? So at every moment, we have an opportunity to see those who have hurt us, those who have reviled us, those who've done us wrong. At every moment, we get to see them in a new light, as the light. And I'm bringing it up today because I know, I'm just guessing, for some of us, our fathers held some of our greatest wounding. For some of us. And so today, we have another opportunity to let this moment be the moment where we share the infinity consciousness with them. On one side of the loop, there may be sadness. On the other side of that infinity loop, there's peace, there's understanding, there's love, there's forgiveness. And connecting with that soul empathically, where they are now, not where they were 55 years ago. Does that make sense? We owe that to the souls with whom we share our journeys. We're the ones who get to remember them as the light of the world. So let's take a deep breath. For all of our beloveds with whom we've shared our journey, for all of those with whom we've shared joy and sadness, wounding and healing, we hold them in the light of love and peace and this empathic connection of simply being present with another eternal spiritual being. The light in us sees the light in them. And there is healing, there is transformation, there is peace. This is how our world is healing. Healing the old beliefs that have wounded, transforming the energy to one of empathy, peace, forgiveness, understanding. Let it be so. We say, so it is. So we let it be. And all together, turn to someone, please, and say, Namaste.